Minister, it's an honor to have you here in this Latin America Reserves event. Your presence in such a busy day in Brasilia is so valuable. We're glad to have here our investors, corporate and financial, as well as global guests. I want to thank you for your presence. And so I would like to begin this conversation with a comparison between Brazil's current moment and what are your perspectives for this government. Since January, with the beginning of this presidency, and I would like to know your perspectives on asset prices that went up. Is your outlook positive or negative? Thank you, Christopher. And I think the Eurasia Group with a focus on Latin America, it's very important to us to be with your credibility. It's a pleasure to be here online and to talk about this special moment that Brazil is experiences. The numbers speak for themselves, and within the turn of year, we have gone through an institutional crisis in January 8 that has instigated a crisis, a political crisis, and therefore an economic. And we all have an expectation as to the numbers of growth in Brazil. I would like to start by saying that the first hit and success of the President Lula was recreating the Ministry of Planning in such a pivotal moment for planning in Brazil. In the pandemic, we didn't have a ministry so that Brazil could have a safe place, not only for the sanitary crisis, but by their repercussions, a country whose economy was paralyzed. So recreating the Ministry of Planning made all the difference. And the second point that I would like to point out, which was a scare to me, was the fact that the president, by understanding that we have a broad front, and although it is a left-wing government, chose as Minister of Planning someone who has a different economic outlook. And this, in a way, has contributed to calming things down when it comes to the market and the Brazilian macroeconomics. A minister like Fernando Haddad ensures safety through dialogue and comforts us in the economic team so we can transmit our viewpoints. So within that framework, the numbers speak for themselves. The focus of the central banks foresaw a growth for Brazil when it comes to the GDP. Just today, an estimate of growth of 2% was reported, and we did absolutely nothing and will grow by 2.2 and 2.3%. Furthermore, recent data indicate that the inflation has a deceleration trend, especially when it comes to food prices, meat prices, and services. And that is within a scenario, we come from 2020, 2021, in which the inflation was 10%, and now that it is 5%, it should be celebrated. All of these aspects, including the relation with the compelling speech of the Ministry of Finances regarding our tax commitment, we have presented in the Chamber of Deputies, already approved by the Senate, and returning to the Chamber of Deputies for adjustments. This framework, these rules that establish quite clearly that we have tax responsibilities with focus on expense control, so that next year we can start, despite our 0.25 margin, we want to go to a zero deficit. And there is an estimate that this year we can possibly reach -1, and with the possibility of having it down to a zero next year. That all changed the perspective of the market towards Brazil. And so the numbers speak for themselves. The outlook is very positive, not only regarding the tax framework, but as to showing the responsibility that Brazil has towards its accounts. The framework is not a miracle worker in and of itself, but it controls our debt in relation to our GDP, and that allows us to say by Brazil, so internally and for the rest of the world, that we are reaching towards the center when it comes to the economy. Perfect. We do live in an upwards movement when it comes to the situation. Moving on to tax reform, besides the framework, maybe it's the most important item in the Chamber of Deputies. I would like to know how the reform is being undertaken, and also going through your broad experience in the Senate. How do you proceed? And is there a possibility of the tax reform being stopped? Well, Christopher, I think the reform is the flip side of this coin. Looking internally, public expenses, this is not a pendular government, and it doesn't have a lot of expenses. And another information then I think about our primary deficit is that with the numbers that we have in mind, since 2017 and until now, in 2017, we had a zero point 0.9 deficit, and it has been decreasing, going into -1 in primary expenses. Apart from the year of 2020, that was the year of pandemic, and we have to be honest and disregard that year that had an excess of expenses. Since 2017 counting, and until now, we have an average expense, an average of 18% or 19% of the GDP. We should do our homeworks now, and our only silver bullet is tax reform. Brazil needs to grow sustainably and in a way that lasts. Brazil has never grown in the last 3 decades or even the last 4 decades. So in the last 35 or 40 years, as an average, Brazil grows 1% a year. And Brazil is a powerhouse in hydric resources and land resources. The agribusiness speaks for itself. The commodities, with our commodities, there is no reason not to grow. And we know that sustainable and lasting growth will only go through a tax reform. Today we have a tax reform that, if it's not ideal, it's at the very least very good. It has raised productivity, guaranteeing investments and reducing distortions, guaranteeing less litigation, credit deduction, and compliance with transactions. In all of these aspects, the tax reform simplifies, unifies, and tributes in the destination and not on the origin, causing a good reaction to the economy. But does it pass or not? Well, from my 8-year experience within the Congress, I've had the joy to be the first woman to preside this meeting where reforms go through. I have designated a few congressmen. We were there in the pension reform, labor reform, and now we are following the tax reform. I've never seen a more favorable environment. And I speak like that as a professor that has began discussing this matter since the 90s in classrooms as a teacher. So I've never seen a more favorable environment, very fruitful, but I've also never seen that much urgency in improving the reform. I think that is the point. In the Chamber of Deputies, I believe that if it doesn't happen before the last week of July, before our breaks, it will happen in the first week of August. There are concentrated efforts so as to approve it in July, in the middle of July, or in the beginning of August. And in the Senate, I know where the attention points or the clash points are, especially when it comes to raising tax burden in services, which reduces the tax burden in industry, generating the biggest number of salaries with the best salaries, alleviating the burden of industry and making the industry competitive again, together with Asian countries' industries, for example. But it can require a different care and rate according to the services, and the Senate will keep a close eye on that. States such as mine, Mato Grosso, which is a productive state and not a consumer state that has a lower demographic density, the Regional Development Fund, which allows new investments for these regions, railways, highways, ports, airports, but also a fund that guarantees a support in short and medium terms so that the states don't lose tax collection. Because this reform is progressive and already shows results in by the second year, there is a support to protect municipalities and cities in short term. It is gradual and it'll take 20 years in this federative pact. I have a very positive outlook, but I don't believe in the reform for the month of November because we need dialogue, we need understanding to understand bigger conflicts. But I'm still positive that in the turn of the year, Brazil can finally have a tax system that is fair and long lasting, which means generating jobs and reducing the inequality. And also, we in Eurasia see a similar scenario. We have never seen a more favorable scenario to approve this tax reform. Let me take this opportunity to put a question for us to answer. The day today is an important day for the council, for which will decide on inflation, big decisions. And I would like to ask, how do you see the relationships of the government between the government and the central banks and this tension in the interest policies? I see that you have manifested your vision publicly, but I would also like to ask you about the potential. Is there more tension in the next few months if the central bank takes a while more to initiate this civic rate reduction? And also comments and remarks. Feel free to give them. Well, starting for the tax goal, Minister Haddad has already given us a roadmap, and I would summarize it all in 3 words: previsibility, credibility, and legal safety. I believe that our legal team is plural, and that makes a difference. About legal safety and predictability, I think they have a lot to do with the decisions made today. And with that, maybe I have already responded. And I've responded with a lot of, with my mind at ease, because when talking to a big vehicle, mediatic vehicle, we're discussing 2026 already. But I will stop myself there because I can't predict our votes, nor what is going to be decided here in the afternoon. But in relation to Selic rate and interest rates, which would also be the third and decisive factor for Brazil to have cheaper credits so that the productive sector can get funding and generate jobs and income and grow. I can speak very positively that in this government I have a more literal vision, and I am favorable to the autonomy of the central bank. I gave a vow of trust in Roberto Campos, and I'm not an economist. I am a lawyer, and so I would like to give a few considerations. I am a center politician. I think the virtue is in the center. And I think the difference between the poison and the medicine is in the dose. And I think Brazil has a lot of experience in that. The cure and the venom, the difference between the two is but the dose. Comparing to the past, we had a Selic rate of 13.75 when we had 10 in inflation, or we had interest rates 3.5, or 4, and today we have one of the biggest interest rates in the world with a totally different environment. I'm not going to repeat myself, but the environment is favorable, where we had a CELIC rate of 13.75 rate during a period of institutional instability that cannot be ignored, where we were discussing if the elections were truthful or not. So we don't have that political crisis anymore, and the expectations when it comes to the political aspect, we had a growth, a percent that was less than 1%, and a 2% of growth. The dropping interest rates from month to month, together with the approval of a framework with a commitment of honor. We cannot let the debt reach a unsustainable threshold. So when we're talking about an inflation that is not consumer based, a new IPCA has been released on our rents. All of this shows that we can already talk about a drop of interests. I'm not going to talk about the percentual. We need to respect the numbers, but this indication needs to be made. And I will finish soon, telling that the central bank in their last meeting has shown in the minute, has shown a trend for a possible drop in the second semester starting August. So we shall wait. And from that moment on, those numbers will maybe drop, and that will indicate a more positive element when it comes to an upturn in economy, and a positive outlook in Brazil. Perfect. Thank you so much, Minister. I would like to move on to a broader horizon in the government's agenda. Two important landmarks: the tax reform in August. What are your perspectives on the approval until November? What is the priority of the economical agenda starting from these two landmarks? Is that an agenda of your own ministry? But if you were to put these two or three initiatives that are economic priorities, how would you view that? Again, Brazil needs to grow with urgency. We're stepping out of a pandemic and going back to world hunger. It's true that unemployment rates are dropping. We have reached 9.5 million in unemployed people. So all the numbers show that Brazil is one of the most unequal countries in the world. We cannot wait until next January for the policies to be executed. While we are looking inwards, cutting our expenses and having fiscal responsibilities, returning to investing, generating jobs and income, the government is also helping in that sense. The first one is in investment policies that not only brings foreign investments but also private investments. So we have an announcement the end of July or beginning of August. The president will announce robust investments within the possibilities of public finance. We have an expenses cap. So there is a lot of difficulties approaching that. But there are a lot of initiatives from the federal government, and Brazil will only go back to growth if there is a partnership between public and private investments. We have many things at play. We're going to back all of them up or gather all of them up, and we will be announcing auctions and concessions and authorizations in relation to logistics in Brazil, such as railways, highways, ports, airports, in some cases, moving to private initiatives, as well as these PPPs. In the second semester, the focus will also be with Minister Haddad. Obviously, the correct timing is of essence. Not consumerism reform, but income reform. Brazil is a very unequal country, and we need to reveal the tax collection, which is much more collected through personal assets more than income. And the president has a commitment by the end of his office, allowing the middle class to have more room to breathe. And those who have an income up to 5,000 reais won't need to hand their taxes. So from one side, we have the Ministry of Planning and Budgeting. We need to control public expenses. I will need to discuss this a lot in such an unequal country where many public policies need to be recreated or reheated because they were out of date for such a long time. And we have inside our ministry two offices that need to watch the numbers. And one specific was created, and it's so important, and it is the Office of Monitoring and Evaluation of Public Policies. So we will be announcing a few news that are coming up. Furthermore, we are facing a PPA, one of Brazil's biggest problems, and this is something that I have as a mission. In 5 years, we won't acquire everything, but we need to change Brazil's planning culture. So this year of PPA, which is a medium-term planning, which outlines the goals and guidelines for 2024 and 25. It's being highly, people are joining in. I've been in many capitals and I have 7 missing. I had COVID and I was missing for a week. But in August 31, we will be handing in the annual plan with all the guidelines linked to LDO, and the budgeting law that will be handed in August 31. And for that, the long term, we start the second semester, and with everyone's help, Eurasia will be very welcome with their contributions. And within the ministries and with the judiciary power, the Court of Accounting, the National Congress, with the um, agenda, which is 2440 and not 2450. We're thinking about 40 laws that will lead Brazil in public policies in 2024, all throughout 2040. This is a semester that will demand great efforts. And with the ministry and the Congress, to address the many Brazils we have, because we have many types of inequality within Brazil. And so we should separate them by race, by region, and depending on each and every context. And the face of poverty in Brazil is always a black woman from the Northeast, or so I always say. This is something I have been saying since my first day as a senator, and even before as a deputy, which is a national development strategy. We have plans being undertaken by the ministry with partnerships with other ministries, and regionally and nationally. With those partnerships, hopefully we can advance in this strategic plan. Perfect, ministry. Very well put. This debate is very important so as to broaden our horizons and think about development plans in the long term, even in the global setting. That is a concern. I guess my last question would be, how do you feel Brazil currently within this world of transformations and opportunities? What is the government thinking when thinking about foreign investments? And I won't take too much of your time, and I thank you in advance. Um, First and foremost, I didn't mention that I was gifted the news that in public policies we talk about controlling expenses a lot, and so just so I can close the former question, we have a very honorable profession from INSPER that makes the point to face with a lot of courage the spender review that the world calls. But we are going to face that, and public policies exist to be enhanced. And even when the goals are not met, we have to have the courage to own up to that and maybe eliminate that policy, especially going out of a considerable deficit. And before answering the last question, I thank you for welcoming me, and I will be here when necessary. All in all, I think Brazil is back after a after isolating itself. after a government that preached denial, and Brazil will not go anywhere alone. Just like the world, we have topics that are priority, that are collective, and that meet other countries' demand. So, in a geopolitical setting, Brazil has been distinguished. And when the president was in COP in Egypt, we are going to preside the COP, and we are very optimistic about it. We know about the sustainable development and the need to preserve the Amazon forest as well as our rivers. We have the Ministry of the Environment, Marina Silva, a very renowned politician. And Brazil came back to this global setting. And we are very optimistic as to foreign commercials, commercial trades. Surely there will be setbacks as to current decisions, but overall, we're very optimistic to sign the deal between Mercosur and the European Union. If not this year, then the next year. Brazil is a part of BRICS and in OCDE, and we will be the only country to be in both. Of course, this is a more medium term vision, but this signalization, this indication is important. The president's speech in France was music to our ears. It pleased us very much when the president said, "We know of our responsibilities with the environment. We know about our impact on the economy when it comes to agribusiness. We need to be sustainable. We are aware of that, but we need help. We need help of the international funds and the Amazon Fund that will help us take care of that heritage so as to not give up our sovereignty, but to reinforce our responsibilities." I am very happy to be working alongside Lula, a responsible president that knows that the country has sovereignty, but still is very caring. And me and Minister Haddad, we have different responsibilities. We are responsible for that foreign funding. I'm the Minister of Planning. I'm I control BEAD and other organizations, and Haddad is on to BRICS, and together we are ruling over many important realms. And I'm very happy to say that we are going to different realms. We are searching sustainability, green economy, and I'd be remiss if I didn't praise myself. I am really happy about Panama and their gender politics, all of their investments and the projects that are being approved here in Brazil with these lines of financing, bilateral financing, with sustainability and green economy. But in this project, the encouraging prospects are thrilling. And with these words, I would like to end on a high note so that we can bet on Latin America. The census just came out, and that shows that we are smaller than we thought, but there are opportunities. But we still have a demographic positive outlook, and that we have 4 years to really seize our work. We're going to work 24/7, and we're going to be responsible for a skyrocket in life quality and also growth. Since I was a little kid, and because I have experience as a teacher, I have to bring this to the country and to our workers. Thank you so much, Minister, for your words. They are very welcome. I thank you.